I'm Joseph Harker. I work as assistant comment editor at The Guardian. My job involves editing the comment pages, and we have writers such as Gary Young, Polly Toynbee, Jonathan Friedland, deciding what the best stories for the mix for that particular day are, and then finding someone to write them. So it's a really interesting job. We cover all sorts of things, from politics to international issues to culture, and we're working with some of the best writers in the country. I also run the Positive Action Scheme, which we set up about 10 years ago, in which ethnic minorities, black and Asian, normally students or recent students who want to get into journalism, can come in, they apply to us, we interview them all, and then they get a 2 or 3 week work placement here, in which time they work with some of our best journalists across a range of departments, from features to the website to multimedia, and at the end of it they get a much clearer idea about what it's really like to be a journalist and to work in a national newspaper and on a website. I think first of all I'd say you have to work hard, be prepared to work really hard, harder than the next guy, because it's a very competitive industry, and you can't afford to kind of sit on your laurels or think about how hard done by you've been, and when you do get rejections, you have to pick yourself up and keep fighting. I would also say you have to be prepared to learn. A lot of people come into journalism, and I could even say I did myself, thinking that you know it all, thinking that you know the stories, that you know what it is, and that you know what other people want to read. And I was lucky. When I started out, I was at the Voice newspaper, and I had a really good news editor, an editor, and they put me right on a lot of things. They told me that it's not just, that they told me how to style the stories, how to get stories, how readers wanted the stories to be presented to them. And I found that a really interesting experience, even though at the time I was so confident and young, and I thought, what could they possibly teach me? So I think you always have to learn from other people, and I'm still learning even now, 20 years later. I would always recommend that people have a degree, because I think it shows that you can think, it shows that you have an interest, and it shows that you've got a broad mind. I'd also always recommend that people have a degree in a subject that's not media related, because you can learn about media when you get here, and you can learn about journalism and all that. And things like economics, history, English, a language, law, they're all really useful in being a journalist. I actually am a scientist myself. My degree is in engineering, and I even find that can be quite useful, and certainly in terms of interpreting statistics, which is often part of a journalist's job. So get something that you can really bring to the newspaper or website that you're working with, and so a skill that you can offer, and that gives you something that sticks you out from the rest of the crowd. I think it's really important to be yourself. I think a lot of people come into newspapers, and certainly national newspapers, where they feel that there's a very dominant culture within the organisation, and they feel that they have to fit in, or in some ways reject their own past, their own history. I think it's very important that people are confident in who they are, and that they can express their own perspective on issues. I think traditionally the British media has been white, it's been male, it's been Oxbridge, it's been home counties dominated, and people have felt that they have to imitate that kind of a person in order to get on. I think more and more the media now realise that they're about reflecting the whole community, the whole of the country, be that you're working class, you're Scottish, you're from an ethnic minority. And there are lots of times when being different really helps, like understanding what's happening in Pakistan or a different part, or USA or a different part of the world. It can be very useful if you've got that family connection or specialist interest. So if you know more about hip-hop than opera, then that can be a really good thing, because there might be stories that represent where that's is more valid than pretending you go to the Royal Opera House every week. It's really important that you are critical, and I say that not being moany, whingy kind of critical person, but when you are presented with something and you have questions about it, that you express those questions, and that you have a critical mind. That stories are often given to you, but often it's the story behind the story which is interesting. And not only thinking or suspecting that something it might be different, but going in and thinking, well, asking questions and putting people on the spot and saying, well, actually that doesn't quite add up, could you explain that? It may be that there isn't a story underneath it anyway, but you have to have that kind of mindset. And how you interpret facts and statistics and question the information that you're given is very much part of being a journalist. I think to be a good journalist today, you have to have a good grasp of English. That's a starting point. You also have to be creative, which means having an open mind about things and being able to come up with different ideas when you see something presented. How can I develop that story? How can I develop that thing and make it more interesting and add a new depth to that issue? And I think more than anything else, you have to be tenacious. I think more than anything else today, you have to be tenacious because, as we all know, the jobs market for journalists is maybe not as good as it was. Although, having said that, there are lots of websites around where people have an outlet for writing, which wasn't there 10, 20 years ago. But you have to, if you get a rejection, you have to make sure that you don't let it get you down, that you then go on to the next one. If you are, and that a rejection in terms of a job or in terms of a story idea that you're pitching to an editor, think of rejections as a learning experience. Try and get feedback as to why you didn't get what you were wanting, and that will help you pitch your stories and your ideas better to the next person.